it's festival seating, Vanessa. We got to get there and.
Bring your lunch.
So,
Okay, what do you just, you go like
Is
that?
it festival
Yeah, just
Festival seating.
Festival seating, it's too funny. Actually, we bring Sean to college on Monday. He goes back Labor Day.
You don't?
Mhm.
Late, huh?
They go back late, yeah, they do.
we're just waiting for one board member, so we'll start in a minute.
Just the coolest, just like where it's been.
I know, it feels good.
Oh, boy. Yeah. We're going to do that change. Right, immediately, so do the pledge and then do that, so. Give it a dirty island or something.
Start flapping.
Do you notice if it's, when I say something like this?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it is. Sorry, sometimes it is.
That's a bee stage lately.
Yes,
Is that
there
the
you
same
go.
thing?
So
Oh my
you
gosh.
were,
By some bee.
you were in Albany, downtown? Yeah, she's coming around, see her coming around.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay. Sometimes I guess if you do it all the time, you just get used to it.
That's why I used to stay at like 5:45, because it was just, it didn't matter whether you left at 5 o'clock, 5:45, you got home at the same time. Just got the level of frustration in the
I'm just like
car.
that. Some cheap, but it's not
You
really.
know, and my wife would drove a mile to
Oh, really?
Yeah, I said that was going
one stop sign. And I go, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yes, yes, yes. Since 2013.
All right, here she is.
Okay, we're ready to run. So I'd like to call this meeting of the first session of August, our business meeting, to order. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jim's flag was up there. So as we start the meeting tonight, as everyone here I think knows, we've had, as a school district, had to deal with the untimely death of two of our younger teaching staff people, and we're going to recognize that before we get into adopting an agenda. Deanna, I think you're going to give a couple words about Jen Robertaccio, and then Naomi will talk about Brian Skinner, and then we will move to a moment of silence, and then we'll move on with our meeting. So, Deanna?
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, it's been a tragic week, to say the least. I just wanted to mention a few words about Jennifer Robertaccio. As we all know, Jen served as an AIS teacher up until her cancer diagnosis. She was a cherished colleague and incredibly skilled teacher. She will be remembered for her strength, courage, her beautiful spirit and smile, but most importantly for the love of her family and friends. Her husband talks about this story with her that, a lot of teachers, and I remember growing up with my teachers, when the teacher saw me, they'd be like, oh, I want my own time, I want my own time. This was a teacher and a young woman that, with a beautiful two children, that would actually seek out her students and want to see them and introduce her children to them. So, I think we want to remember her beautiful smile, her vibrant personality. I know her husband, I think she was born to be a mom and a teacher, and just a beautiful, beautiful overall soul.
Thank you. Thank you. Naomi?
Yes.
Start the same way. Friday, the Shenendehowa community lost devoted elementary school teacher Brian Skinner, and I'm here to talk about Brian. My heart goes out to his family, friends, colleagues, and students. Like many, I've been bewildered by Brian's sudden death and tragic death, which has devastated many, including his former students. We may never fully understand what happened, but I'd like to share a few reasons why Brian's death leaves a gaping hole in the hearts of so many. As a parent, I've known Brian Skinner for as long as he's been a teacher at Orinda Elementary School. Known as Mr. Skinner by his students, he was a third grade reading teacher and fifth grade math teacher for my older son. He cared and believed in his students. I should say he cared about and believed in his students. About a year ago, I even received a letter of recommendation from Mr. Skinner for a former student to participate in the middle school robotics program, and this meant a lot for this student. I know that he tutored students at Half Moon Heights, formerly known as the Turf, and mentored students after school. Cameron can't be here tonight, but he was going to speak to that because Cameron Brimhall was tutored by Mr. Skinner. I've seen him help build the 5th grade musical set, specifically for my older son, for Aladdin. I have really fond memories of that. And he played an intense game of basketball during a Shen Elementary School competition amongst teachers, and many of you will remember that. It was originally called March Madness and then Shen All In. I watched him race the other 5th grade teachers on the high school east track as students cheered him on. He was their hero. Mr. Skinner will be remembered for his big heart and contagious smile. He was a cool teacher, genuinely loved and respected by his students. Quoting a fellow teacher and a friend of mine, Michelle Brimhall, there will be lots of ways for Brian to be remembered at Orenda. There will be a Brian effect, more looking out for each other. The Orenda family will only be stronger through this tragedy.
Thank you, Naomi. And right before we do, just take a second in silence for thoughts and prayers for these two families and for our school district for losing two people who write in the words that we heard tonight, direct words about caring for students, and that's really what we're all about. I would add to our list tonight full recovery of Glenville policeman Ben Ferretti as well. So could we have a moment of silence? Thank you. So thank you, and Mike Smith, thank you for having to, and the district and everybody else who got a call late Friday night and had to deal with this latest tragedy. So thank you for being there for people. I think that people look to us as a school district to, and for leadership from the school district, and I think we have responded appropriately. Could we move on to our meeting? Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Bob, second. Christina? All those in favor? The agenda is adopted. We'll move on to Board of Education comments, and I'm still giving Naomi a free pass here, as she doesn't put the pressure that she has to go first, and just spoke anyway, but any board member have comments tonight they'd like to make? Bob?
Yeah, I'm very happy that our guest speaker for 5th of September, Jessica Leahy, the author of The Gift of Failure, that this effort is underway. What this brings forward is a chance to communicate in the public realm on how we are treating students who are often trapped in this mindset of always achieving and achieving well, whether it be on paper with their resume for college or whether how they are on social media. And this sort of came to light, well, probably within the last 10 years. Counselors started to see students that on paper looked great. They were doing all these activities, but when they talked to them, they were frustrated because they weren't feeling that they were accomplishing a lot. They didn't see a lot of value in all these things that they were doing. And that has led to some of the changes we made in the counseling program, and also led to the group on our counseling committee to all read this book, The Gift of Failure. The title sort of implies that it's always great to fail, it's always great to lose, and that's not really what the title of the book is all about. It's really all about the need to be resilient as you encounter failures. Because what happens nowadays is that we don't give a lot of our overachieving kids the opportunity to fail and be resilient and move on. They're just told not to fail. That's the message that we convey to them. And so this is a chance, I think, to bring a lot of great ideas for this, I would say, underserved group of students, because they tend to get overlooked. And I think this is a chance to talk about this because we as a district, we're a high achieving district. We're proud of everything our students do. But also, I think we do create within our culture this mindset that I'm not allowed to fail. I'm not allowed to do anything wrong, when at the same time, everybody at one time does a couple things that they learn from. So I think this will get out there. I look forward to this being in the public domain and and helping us to better understand it, not only now, but throughout the year. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob, and I think that fits in with the goals that we've talked about, that you laid out for next year, dealing with not only on the upper end and looking at failure, but also those folks in the middle and how they feel about things. So I think it's a real timely message for us to get, and right at the beginning of school, good place to start. How about other board comments?
I'll just make a real quick comment. Yesterday, I had to take my daughter to get her sports physical, and we had to go to this high school East, and he met with the doctor because she's going into a varsity sport and had to do that. It was one of the most organized things I've ever seen. They told me to get there early. It started at 4:30. I was there at 4, and I was not the first person in line. By the time 4:15 came along, there must have been 40 people in line. It was crazy. But as soon as that door opened, you went to this station, you had your forms, you showed them, they gave you the directions, they took a piece of paper, you went to the next station, they had their forms, and you just went through the line, and the whole thing took about 10 minutes once you got in there, but it was so organized, it was great to see. And I did hear a couple comments from people of, we got to wait in this line, but then as you're walking out, like, oh, that wasn't bad. So that was nice to see that they have the athletic department and the health department, the doctors that came in from outside to check out the kids. They really all worked together really well. So it was awesome to see.
Great.
I want to second Todd's comment too, bringing Olivia in for her sport for JV. 7:30, I thought I had to get there so early. I thought there'd be a line. Nobody was there. I had 2 kids in front of me, but the nurses, they opened with the biggest smile on their faces at 7:30 in the morning. Very pleasant. It was wonderful. I talked to them for a while. I was there longer talking to them than I was for the physical for Olivia, for the sign-off for Olivia. But yeah, that's just a great experience, and I think we give such a great. I don't think all schools operate that smoothly. So yeah, great comment, Todd.
I wanted to add that I got there a little late. I'm sorry, I missed you, Deanna, and I saw you in passing at the 12-month picnic for the employees. That was very nice. I did not realize, it's North Star Church,
North Star
correct?
Church, yeah.
I think it's a great service that they offer. They come, they serve, they're bright-eyed, very happy all the way to the end, and so, but also meeting with the employees. But like I said, I got there a little bit late in the process, and next year I'll definitely get there earlier. I don't want to miss people. But that was very nice. And I'm also looking forward to my first graduation, which is the 17th. I'm very excited about that, which will be at High School West.
Great. Gary?
Yes. To possibly elaborate a little bit more on the permission to fail. Just this morning, was having breakfast with 3 of my neighbors. One's a PhD from MIT. All 3 of them were engineers, and then there was me. But we happened to be talking about athletics, and by the way, it's sort of a mixed bag, I would say. 2 of them were actually just almost anti-athletic. But the point I was making was that through athletics, the kids have an opportunity to face adversity, to face failure, to lose. And they have to persevere. They have to work together. They learn something that is virtually impossible to replicate in a classroom. And I think that's one of the lasting values of the athletic program. We talk about, being the #1 athletic program in the state of New York for 3 years in a row, which is mind-boggling. And being number 18 in the country for the boys swimming and diving team. Again, that's pretty mind-boggling stuff.
What about those girls?
But it isn't.
What about those girls, Al? Yeah, they're pretty amazing too.
Well, I think Dr. Robinson or someone made the point that in each of those 3 years, it was a different group of teams that accounted for us rising to the top. It was the boys, then it was a combination of boys and girls teams, and this year it was girls teams that were supreme. And that's much better than having, a completely dominant basketball, baseball program or whatever, and the rest of the thing is kind of just lost in the shuffle. But anyway, I really do think that the athletic program is of tremendous value. Sometimes maybe we get a little bit overboard on some of them once in a while, but nonetheless, what the kids bring away from it is really of great value, and it goes beyond their high school years. But the other thing I actually did want to talk about was just give you an update. As you probably know, I'm also a member of the Capital Region BOCES Board, and we are deep into the process of hiring 2 individuals. We've hired one to lead the BOCES program. One is essentially a legal title and very defined by law, and that's the district superintendent. And that person, 40% of their time is paid for by the state education department. And they are really a liaison with school districts, and they are the spokesperson for the commissioner and so forth to the school districts and so on. And of course, they're working in both directions to provide communications from school district superintendents primarily, and bringing their views and opinions back. But in addition to that, you have the actual manager of the system, and there are 5 major departments, and we have an individual that's basically going to take over that. But because we will have 2 people working in that capacity rather than 1, we feel that we have the potential to do things that we weren't able to emphasize in the past when you were so busy managing the nuts and bolts of the system. The leadership, the imagination, the creativity aspect of it, by virtue of lack of time, kind of gets put on the back burner, and we feel that this will be very valuable to us.
So have you
Proof will be
have you
inputted.
announced names yet?
We have one, Anita Murphy. She is the district superintendent, and that is strictly her title. She has been a she has been a school district superintendent. She has worked for the state education department, and she has worked in a number of environments throughout the state, like a deputy or assistant superintendent in Albany, and some other large cities and so forth. But her most recent assignment prior to this was more of a rural district in the western part of the state. So she's had a broad experience, and a very dynamic person. When she walks into a room, you know she's there. So,
Thank you, Gary.
so I did want to bring you up to speed that that's going on.
I just wanted to make a comment. I was on campus the first day of summer school, and I have to say I was so impressed to see, how many kids were taking advantage of the different opportunities, whether it's bridge courses, Regents review to retake Regents, or just the extra help they needed to retake a course, or whatever the case may be. But I was pleasantly surprised to see how actually kids were seemed not dreading it. They actually were, having great conversations, and the energy, even during the summer here, was great to see. And I know because I was dropping off one of my sons who was going through Regents review to retake one of the Regents. But even he said, coming home, just how, he was pleasantly surprised himself that it wasn't so bad, Mom, but how the teachers, to thank all the teachers, the administrators who also take the time to work during those summer times to make sure our kids are getting all the supports, but also, again, those bridge courses, everything else that we have added on over the years, I think is just so critical to success for our kids as we talk about, whether it's bridging the gap for some of our middle students or other kids that might just need the additional support. So just was happy to see that. And like I said, even though it's not the full school year, it's still buzzing this campus as always. So again, thank you to our staff who, continue to support our students. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to build on just one thing that Naomi mentioned, the picnic for staff. It was, Jay, a lot of your folks were at the 11:30 sitting, and then there was a 12:30 sitting. I was there for the 11:30 sitting and had to leave to another event, but I just want to comment, one, a thank you, a shout out to North Star Church for doing this, donating this, and they're there, and they've got a lot of volunteers. But I went around, I don't know a lot of our people, so I went around to various tables as I chewed on my hot dogs and hamburgers and ate too much. I was really struck by the pride that people had. I didn't hear any cynics, and I wasn't looking for them, but when I asked people where they worked and what they did, all of them, to a person, spoke of pride of what they did. And they realized how important it was, and didn't complain about job conditions, and and we came in here tonight, Vanessa, and they were, two of the guys that I had a hamburger with were in here vacuuming the rug before we got in here and moving things around and just doing it with a lot of energy, and glad they're working here. And I thought, that's a great sign when especially with support staff who just have just a real positive attitude. So Jay, to you and to all the leadership that's involved, my sense was they feel supported and listened to, and they know they're doing an important job. And so I think that's a great thing to find out here. So at any rate, I want to thank you. We'll move on to public comments. I don't know if there's, let me ask the question. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? I didn't think I saw anybody out there, so I won't give our normal speech on that. We'll move directly to the superintendent's report. Dr. Robinson.
Sure. Just a couple quick comments before we introduce the presentations. At some point, we need to talk logistically if we're going to have the second board retreat on the 22nd.
Yes.
So I just want to remind you, we need to talk about that. And my apology, and I see now the facilities folks will be Todd and Gary. We had a initial meeting to talk about the concept of another referendum. This I've been talking about. We had a meeting last week. So at some point when we meet again, I'll fold you into that meeting sequence. And plus on the presentation on the 22nd, I was planning to talk to the board again, generally what we were thinking about. So I just wanted to extend an apology because at that point we were kind of undecided who was going to be where, and I wanted to get the conversation going with different people. So I want to bring those two things.
And Todd's going to be absent on the 22nd, so if you can catch up with him.
Yeah, I mean, we won't have many conversations, so it's just purely conceptual even then too. So we have several presentations here, and I tried to, in Friday Bulletin, really just highlight each one of them for you, recognizing that for one, sometimes it's easier to read about something and then see it again to grasp it, so I try to do that piece of it. And so I say that because, for instance, there's several documents. We won't go through all those documents tonight. We just highlight the overview of the plan, but you have some additional documents to committee members and things of that nature for your edification. So Mrs. Carmen and Jay will discuss the plan, which is essential. Wrong one. I got to find the right one. Be great.
So Dr. Robinson is finding the plan. Really, as he mentioned, we're really here to present a few items related to district safety, and one of them is the district safety plan that has to be updated yearly and approved by the Board of Education. That is the only public document that actually goes on the website. All the other safety plans and building level plans are all confidential and kept in special hands, I should say. So tonight for approval is the district safety plan and also the SAFE committee members, and also there will be a couple additions to the SAFE committee members once we have students and once I knew what the board liaisons were, so we'll add those to that list as well. And also for your information only is really the guide to safety and emergency planning, which is one of the first pieces that I wanted to talk about briefly, which for some of you that are relatively new, that guide was developed a couple of years ago to help really identify what our initiatives are for the year, what our safety plans are, when they have to be updated, who's doing it, really to outline process and accountability. And so that document that you guys have is a pretty thick well, it's not thick, it's actually a few pages, but it really outlines what we do, when we do it, who's responsible, and the accountability piece of it. So, that is really revised annually, actually probably more so monthly or quarterly, and it's divided up into various sections, which is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, and that's kind of what the cycle that Jay and I are going to be talking about tonight. And I'm talking about that first piece, which really looks and addresses what school districts can do to reduce or eliminate risk of to life and property. So that guide really helps outline that. Also this year, one of the major accomplishments is we've had safety audits throughout the district. Around in Chattahoochee, we had High School East and Scano and Tusago, and we have them on a cycle every 3 years, 3 to 5 years, depending on the cycle. And coming up for this coming school year, we have middle school, high school west, and Octay we'll be doing safety audits for. Additionally, we have our threat assessment protocol and suicide screening. And this is a new policy that was put in place this past year and process that was really fully implemented this year. And I can say that, we've had a couple kinks here and there with the process, but we've worked through those, and the process has been used and followed through, a few different times. But one of the biggest things that it's really provided is consistency in the process when we identify a perceived or real threat, if somebody is a threat to themselves or to others. And, so it's consistent, but also the fact that if somebody says something or we hear something or somebody tells us something, there's a process that we're following to ensure that that student is safe and all students are safe. So there's some follow-through, which is really nice, and documentation for that, so we have that process. Additionally, we have SAVE meetings. This past year, we didn't really have agenda items. We had a SAVE meeting. We have 3 SAVE meetings scheduled for this coming school year, and we actually have the agendas pretty much outlined and drafted for the year, and we'll add items as needed. And those dates will come out once we know, again, who those liaisons are for the board. So I'll turn it over to Jay to do the next.
Becky, can I just ask you a question? Sure. That is something you referred to. So who does a safety assessment? Do we do debriefing with
the safety audits?
Yeah.
The state police, the sheriff's department, and we walk through each school. We invite the principals to join us. And then at the end of and as we're going through, we're looking at different things as far as maybe unlocked doors, maybe some windows, maybe some other areas that are, let's say, not as covered as they should be to target, to look at. So that's how they should go.
And one of the things actually that we've also done is Jay and I have turned around and walked back again with the sheriffs to say, what are some things that we can do immediately? What are those items that we can either purchase or change immediately? And then what are more short-term, down the road, 6 months, and then versus long-term? Because if it's a long-term or something that's going to cost more money, we obviously have to put, some plan in place for that.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, or I wanted to clarify in my mind that the outside agencies and there's debriefing and there's, thank you.
Exactly. So, yes, I'll be talking about the preparedness piece. This past year, we went through incident command training with 2 schools. It was Carolina-Renda and High School West. That incident command training is a command structure devised by the military, adopted by the NIMS, that's National Incident Management System, through Homeland Security, which SED requires us, and it's mandated for emergency response teams to go through that training piece. So again, like I said, Carolina-Renda and High School West did, and also we conducted a tabletop drills with both buildings. And the tabletop drills are very effective. That is in a setting just like this, and it's either conducted by the fire department, by the fire chief, or the police agencies, depending on what type of incident it would be, whether it be a missing child, whether it be a roof collapse. All these types of hypothetical situations are placed just up on a board, and we talk about the situation, how it's going to be addressed. So that was taken care of. The mass evacuation drills, we do 2 of those a year. Last year was Carolina-Renda's drill, and I'll just speak a moment on that, it was an excellent drill. What we have changed going forward is we will talk with the administration and we'll talk with the emergency response team, and then we'll come in with a scenario, usually that morning. We'll come in with what's going to happen. And for this particular time, it was a gas leak from a construction truck parked on the Carrigan side.
And even though it was already decided that the Orenda principal, Mr. Smith, would be the incident commander at that point, it was just turned right around. And the fire chief went to the Carrigan office and said, we have a gas leak, we need to call 911. And actually, the secretary got on the phone and started calling 911, so we had to rush back in there and say, okay, you can just call my cell phone, because it's usually set up like that. But it worked seamlessly. And again, I mean, once the communication went out to Mr. Smith's office, there's also a process where we evacuate. We usually evacuate outside the building and then take accountability. Well, quick thinking on their part, no, we're going to go right to our relocation site because of where the gas leak was, so that step was bypassed. But it was a perfect, seamless event, and it worked very well. So kudos to that school that they did really a wonderful job. High School West was planned for last year, but during the April time of the plan, we got a lot of rain. The grounds were just not conducive to moving the children into their sites, so we decided to hold that off until September of this coming September, which would be their drill. Next in the preparedness, we have the best practices training development, excuse me, for understanding emergency protocols. And what that is we put together a PowerPoint presentation. It's posted on our HASCON website as well. And we also do individual trainings with emergency response teams on what is a lockout, a lockdown, a shelter in place, and our newest one is our hold in place for schools to use. So that's being conducted. The next step on our preparedness issue is the security updates. For this summer, we started already cabling a lot of the schools. A lot of the schools are already cabled for our new additions of 30 more pin pads, network pin pads. So that means we'll be able to alleviate all the standalone pin pads. There'll be one computerized central location for that. And then 54 more surveillance cameras we're installing. Also, all staff have been trained in the emergency response protocols, violence prevention, and mental health. And that needs to be done by the new mandates that came out in 2016 by September 15th. That has to be done. Okay?
And that's covered through online training that we have, that we do for staff, that staff are able to access.
So Jay just mentioned some security access on the October 24th board meeting. We're going to have a presentation to talk about some of the things that we're doing, so you have a sense of the magnitude and stuff.
So will high school be ready to go on the first day?
High school, it's already in place.
It's already done.
It was in place, just didn't use it.
Gotcha.
So the next piece on this is response. And through our response actions, what we're doing is the emergency plans have been changed back in 2016, and we came out with what we call red binders. So every school is consistent and has the same identical binder and place to search for their particular emergency response plan. Within that made it so much easier for if administrators at another school or whatever, they can always see the same exact plan, even though it might be structured different and different incident command charts and contact information. It's still all in the same section, the same binder. With that, there used to be the 12 fire drills a year. That has recently changed, and it has been very effective. Right now there's 8 evacuation drills, it's called, and then they're conducting 4 lockdowns. New this year is every year we have to update the emergency response plans. And what we're asking the emergency response teams to do in each school, in the sister schools, is combine teams. If I talk about the middle school, for instance, we actually have 3 different separate plans for this building, even though it's under one roof. But if an emergency happens, whether it's happened in Gwan, it's going to affect Acadia. So what we're asking them to do, and we're providing the guidance and assistance as well, is to combine those plans into one. So Carrigan Rend will have one, Shenendehowa will have one, and so on and so forth. And that'll alleviate, we had more staff members to fill the position of the incident command chart.
Can I ask a really, it's going to be an odd question, but in these days, what's odd anymore? Nothing else. If we ever had to, I'm sure we have it, if we had to hold kids overnight, if there was a real threat, not just to, just to our society or community area, do we have the capacity, we're able to do that?
When you say capacity, what do you mean?
Could we do that?
We have enough space,
We have the space.
but it will be comfortable.
Okay. No, I'm just
So
wondering,
actually, I'm
do we?
going to hit on that little piece in a minute. If you can hold on one second, maybe it'll help.
Because we're
some of that.
technically a Red Cross site.
Site.
And we had the ice storm, if you remember a few years ago. They used the middle school, and we have generators in different places to keep power.
So the last piece, when you talk about emergency preparedness, is the recovery piece and restoring the environment and getting it back, to how we want it to be and how it should be to be able to function. So we talk a little bit about crisis teams, and we have crisis teams in every building now, as well as safety teams. And the membership is very similar, but yet their roles are actually a little bit different. And the crisis teams have all had training and yearly updates, and I continue to go to meetings to provide that yearly update to the principals and to that crisis team as they ask, and also to faculty meetings if needed, just to review what a crisis team is, what's the purpose. So we actually have clear policy that speaks to that now, and again, consistency in the roles of crisis teams. We also have, when we talk about recovery and when we talk about threat assessment, we have a lot of coordination with Utica National, as you see when I do the safety award and do the audits for that process. I also sit on the steering committee for New York State for the safety audits, and as a result of that, I was able to work with our local BOCES to bring threat assessment training to BOCES here and be able to provide it for all school districts in our region. So we're going to be looking to have that, I believe it's October 5th. It's slated for, and working with Jennifer Bennett, who is our risk management specialist right now, but also supervises for BOCES. So we have that piece. And then the other piece is the continuity of operations, and that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Deanna. And one of the biggest things that we're really going to be working on this year is it's really being proactive instead of reactive, and planning for any possible, situation. And, what if this, then, we have this. And, if we truly need to evacuate, the entire, campus, what does that look like? And how do we continue to do business? So if we needed to keep students here, how do we still, serve meals if we need to serve meals? How do we, make sure we're communicating with families? What are all those processes in place so that, hopefully it doesn't happen? We are prepared for that, and we're being proactive instead of reactive. So for your approval, again, is that district safety plan. That is a public document. And also we have to submit to SED as well as the SAVE committee, and the other item is for informational purposes and hopefully provides an overview for you.
Just to add, is there any certification requirements for, to make sure that staff are trained or have the right certifications for dealing with a disaster, maybe EMTs, or have the ability to use defibrillators and things like that?
Yes.
So is that part of the plan?
We have, each building is part of the plan. The secretaries collect information on who's CPR, AED trained, and the nurses obviously do, some extensive training. So yes, there is, it's not mandated, but it's something that we know who in the building has that training if need be.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Whitmore is going to come, and again, a lot of information is provided to the board, and our intent is not necessarily to go through every piece of information, and that's why I try to summarize in Friday bulletin again some highlights for you. And so quite frankly, just to some degree, Kathy highlighted a few things, but to a large degree, it's what questions do you have? Because later on the agenda, the board is going to be asked to approve the tax warrant and the levy, which goes with the warrant that we use to eventually produce tax bills in September. So I don't know, Kathy, you want to start with some highlights, but if you have questions based upon what I shared in Friday bulletin, feel free to do so.
As you know, our tax rate increase is going up 0.16%, so pretty minimal. Compared
So just for guidance purposes, that's 0.16. That's less than 0.25%. Just want to make sure we get that right for the documentation.
5 cents, right?
That's correct. So 3 cents per thousand, so that's on our true value tax rate per thousand. So that's after we convert it to full value. As you can see, going back to 2014, we're at 17.75, and we're still significantly under that, even 3 years later. So that's pretty good. I did want to point out one error that I happened to notice as I was looking that we decreased for a couple of years. That 1.38% in 2016 should be a negative. We actually, as you can see, dropped our tax rate 2 years in a row. Any questions on that one?
On that page, just that looking at the, converting percentages into what it really means in our largest value in the town of Clifton Park, the rate goes up, projected rate goes up 5 cents per thousand, right?
Exactly.
Good work.
Okay. Our full value comparison, as you can see, smallest percent is Clifton Park, which of course doesn't really relate to the dollars necessarily because it's still 20 million increase. Largest percent is Stillwater at 62%, but it's only 2.6 million. Biggest dollar increase in full value is $500,000 at 53.9 million. And you can see on the bottom, it's one of the smaller years of growth, but it's still pretty consistent in the 2% range.
Bob, you asked a question about the increase in Stillwater, whether that was a one-time kind of thing or is a pattern.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if there's a
so
response.
this is all based upon bricks and mortar, actual buildings. And so it's Stillwater right now is primed for a lot of growth. And we don't have a lot of the town of Stillwater within the district. We have some, but certainly that's one of those growth areas, particularly what's happening with Global Foundries and things of that nature. And there's a lot of empty land space. So I would imagine that as we move forward, we'll still see certainly the proportion that's in the Shen district being maximized. In fact, I was planning to take a ride at some point, but somebody was telling me about a mega development that's going on the far end of where the Shen district cuts and then goes into to Stillwater, could be even to Mechanicville on that far end. I got to check that. But so that's where it's truly bricks and mortar growth that's taking place.
So is this pop houses or is it businesses?
Well, most of that is actually residential because that's highly residential area. Most of our commercial growth center around Route 9 corridor, 146 corridor is most of our. When I say Route 9, so the most of Route 9 is on the Half Moon side, most of the 146 is on the Clifton Park side. That's most of our commercial growth.
I spoke to Bob. I spoke to a builder the other day who claims to have found the last piece of land in the town of Stillwater that's still in the Shenendehowa district, which he advertises, and is doing 300 apartments right now. Wow. Yeah. So these guys, these developers are shopping for, as we've said before, they're shopping for the Shen district. That's an advertisement for them to help fill their spaces.
Exactly. Okay. Equalization rates. We had 3 changes there in the bold, as you can see, Half Moon, Waterford, and Ballston Spa. Although what's interesting now is Half Moon and Clifton Park are at the same equalization rate now, which is why their tax rate is the same as well.
And for probably more so maybe Naomi's edification, you see Malta and Boston are almost 100%. Those towns do revaluations every year, and so their valuation of the properties are as updated as the process allows. Some towns haven't done reevaluation in decades, and so what happened is that on the time that happens, if you happen to have an older house and somebody build a newer house down the road from you, then they're going to try to jack up your price of your older house because the value of your properties went up because of the newer house, and you have to fight it to say, well, another house similar to mine, that's this and this, the value is this. So that's how the fluctuation. The reason why, because again, having lived this when I was at Mahonison, the town of Rotterdam went through evaluation. It's a third, a third, a third. Third of the folks, their evaluation went down, became lower. Third of the folks stayed the same, and the third of the folks got higher. And you don't hear from the ones here. You don't hear from the ones here. But you raise hell here. And typically the ones that went higher, people with larger houses and more political clout. And so that's the reason why people don't do it, because it turns into a huge political issue when your evaluation go up. And so at least certain towns have been committed to doing it, and they've done it consistently over the years, and those are the two towns that have consistently done it.
Okay. Taxable assessed value, this is before we apply the equalization rates. Again, you can see the percentages consistent with the full value. Largest in this scenario is Malta at 39 million, but they're at 100%, as we said. 2% increase in the taxable assessed value this year. One of the higher increases compared to the last couple. Okay. We also took a look at just converting to the full value, showing you the conversion chart there. Kind of a glimpse as to like what that conversion looks like, what the equalization rates do. Compared to what we budgeted, or what we estimated during our budget season, we estimated a 1.38% increase. Again, the growth in the taxable assessed value helps keep that tax rate down, so we never know what to estimate for that. So
just for capping this off, this is one of those things that you may run into, because people will look at it and say, I live in the town of Waterford and I'm paying $54.47 and Clifton Park is only paying $20. Well, when we run through the formula, if you have a house of a similar value, you're all paying about the same amount of money.
Right.
And so that's where people, you hear the argument all the time, well, I pay so much more taxes, because actually you really don't, because the equalization rate factor here that's what it's called, equalization rate, to equalize the impact and distribute across the various towns. So that's, again, one of those things that you may hear, but you can look at this and say, at the end of the day, the amount of taxes people pay is going to be very comparable based upon the value of your property. If it's a $200,000 house over here and a $200,000 house there, you're going to be paying the same amount of taxes. And it doesn't matter where you live, so to speak, because it formula equalizes.
questions?
So again, the board is going to be asked to approve, and there was a stipulation I mentioned that we're waiting for finalization of the STAR reimbursement from the state, so they may impact the rates a little bit based on how many reimbursements is happening within, but we have an estimate in there that's pretty solid, so we don't think it's going to be a dramatic shift. It could be a shift, but it shouldn't be a dramatic shift in the final rates, and if there's an adjustment, we'll bring it back on the 22nd before we finalize the tax bills.
And these rates that we're looking at here, there was a question, that takes into account the
It does.
the veterans exemption, right?
That was my question. It's included.
Yeah,
it's
in that,
included,
right?
yeah.
It wasn't
Yes.
separate.
Yeah, so what we did here, because last year when we approved it, we were making some assumptions about impact, because we really didn't know how many people, what property they own, the value of the properties, things of that nature. So what we did here on the sheet was just kind of pull it out so the board can see the impact of it. And so I don't have my final bulletin with me, but I gave you some percentages that the percentage impact of this on the tax levy is pretty insignificant. I think it was like less than 0.5%, if I'm not mistaken. And then we look at the amount, the value of the exempt properties was, quite frankly, which is pretty, again, insignificant in comparison to the entire assessed valuation of the properties. When we did our presentation, we were thinking around 2,200 potential, because that's the number we had from the county, because most people who are eligible for the district exemption had already been signed up for the county exemption, and the town of Clifton Park even had exemption, but the town doesn't assess property tax, so it was a facade. And so this number is very consistent with what we thought. What we didn't know was going to be what's going to be the dollar impact. And so this is significantly less than what we anticipated when we were doing the board was approving the basic exemption. So at least now, because it's a tax shift, so instead of so this 683 was socialized across non-exempt properties, so to speak. And even with that socialization you saw on the slides before are still a very insignificant or flat tax rate. So that's the good news to the story, that this was absorbed within a larger scheme of things with very little impact on the overall for the non-exempt taxpayer. Does that make sense? So we just want to carve this
I
out.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we just want to carve it out so that the board will have that information.
That's
So
what confused me.
yeah, so people ask. So I just want to show that to you. Just when we just did it for that purpose.
What do we expect is the potential for additional claims exemption
Well,
applications?
you know, I don't, Gary, and again, I don't anticipate that we're going to see a large number. Only reason why, because the county had the exemption on the books for several years. And so basically, anyone who was eligible would have been applying under the county exemption anyway.
Okay.
And so those people were known. So that's not to say we won't have people moving in
Right.
and may impact the numbers moving forward. But I don't anticipate that, you know, we're going from 2,100 this year to 4,200 next year. I don't think we're going to be seeing that. We could probably see a bump up, but I think that bump up might be just the nature of transitioning into communities. And people have to go through the process prior to March 1 each year anyway. And if I'm not mistaken, Kath, once you kind of get in, once you're signed up, you're pretty much in the system. So to try to make it somewhat easy for people, so you're not every year you got, oh my God, I didn't sign up, I missed it. But there's a time frame that people new to it would have to sign up for the exemptions, and it's a county process, and that's why we have to wait till we get the information from the county to make these determinations.
Okay.
Thank you. We had audit committee and claims. I don't know if there are any questions you had on it. We didn't plan to present them, just if there were questions that the board had.
No question.
The next one, Mr. Mills is going to come forward. Every year this time, we do an overview of enrollment, and for the past 3 years, it's been very good, and I think it's a result of, so if you think about it, 5, 6 years ago, we were cutting to balance the budget. So in other words, what I mean by that, when we had retirements, vacant positions, we were in some cases not filling some of those vacant positions. But as fiscally we became more stable again, one of the things that we started using is, so how do we take advantage of some of those opportunities to do some other things? In the case of elementary, because the elementary enrollment was kind of trending down and now it's kind of trending back up. And so when it was kind of trending down, instead of cutting some of the capacity, we actually kept the capacity. So as it started trending back up, the class sizes will equalize. And because if we were to cut and it's trending back up, then these numbers would have been a lot different in terms of class size and section. So now we're seeing the benefit of that. So if the enrollment keeps trending up, fast forward 2 years, we'll mirror that with recommendations for budget recommendations. Because for elementary, as you probably heard me doing the budget process, elementary sections are driven purely by enrollment. How many kids we have at a particular grade level, and how do we distribute them across X number of sections to have what we call a reasonable class size impact. So for the past 3 years, and Bob will show you in a second, those class size impact have been pretty reasonable across the board.
First thing I would remind you of is that the data was done on Wednesday, so this is now Tuesday of the next week, so it's inaccurate.
It's already changed.
It's changed every day. We had 10 people come in today, so, and a few go out. So just a reminder to the board that this particular slide just shows you your average class size minimums that we put up, your average class size target, and then the average class size maximum. So some of the information I referred to are bubbles off the maximum. That's the kind of the easiest way to go through some of the material that's there. So again, that's just for your reference. This sheet, which looks better, well, on paper, again, in front of you or on a device, across the top are the grade levels: kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then down the side are the schools. So this blue band up here is all Orangen. For example, it says kindergarten, 4 sections, 82 students, an average of 20.50 per section. I already know that that's off by 6 students because we've had students 6 students placed in those homerooms since the data was run. But just as an example, that's how that works. And this fluctuates in and out every day between now and the start of school. So we'll be adding more students, and we'll be losing some students as parents notify us that they've left. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. There's Chango, and all across the board you can see each of the schools that are there. And again, this is just an easy way to take a look at if you had 4 sections and you had X number of kids and you divided them up as evenly as you could, that's how they would fall.
Before we go off this, one of the things I want to point out, different number of sections vary by buildings based on enrollments, just the nature of the beast. And I'm going to give you the contrast. So you have 4 sections here in Oranjan, and you have 2 sections in Tasago. And so you have 32 kindergarten kids in Tasago. So if somebody say, okay, well, I'm not going to have one section of 32 kids. So what we do, we look at Scano and Tasago and say, okay, between the 2 buildings, how do we then, if we have to do some redistribution between the 2 buildings, so we try to maximize the sister school piece. We've been doing this for a number of years now, particularly with kindergarten with the sister schools. So I just give you the contrast because sometimes you hear like, oh my God, we only have 3 sections. This building has 5 sections. Well, because they have more kids in that particular grade level or those kind of things. So sometimes people miss the logic of it, and I don't want this board to miss the logic of it because it's always the piece that we get back to.
And we also,
Since you're on that, can I ask a question? So using Scano and Tasago, so are you doing that as far, I mean, they're connected. And you see it happen in the middle school. The boundaries sort of move, but you don't necessarily see it in the elementary schools. You know, the classrooms are in their buildings except for maybe some special classes like maybe. We have done kindergarten sharing off at Tasago and Scano for the past 2, maybe 3 years. Okay, so you have Scano children. Is that reflected in this?
I mean, so when we look at the whole number of sections. So what the principals do, the principals get together and they start looking at all their program needs and all their staffing needs, and they start saying, okay, do you want to host this particular type of class in your building, and I host this in my building? So that's also part of the especially kindergarten. Kindergarten is easy because, quite frankly, with you, the kids come, and in those cases, well, the upper grades become a little bit more difficult because kids and families get accustomed to going to a particular school. Kindergarten is easy because in many cases it's first time moving in, and yeah, you're going to this building, but actually you're going to go right versus left. We also do, and we knock on wood, I don't think we're doing any this year yet. We've had some times where we can't do the sister schools at Chango. Chango a couple years ago, we ran in the 2nd grade, was it, Bob? 2nd. And we shift some Chango kids to Carrigan because that's the contiguous boundary with that piece of, and we try not to do that because what you get is now, okay, you happen to be the last people moving into this neighborhood, and all the other 2nd grade kids are going to the school that they can see, and your kid is getting on a bus to go to another school. So we try to minimize that as much as possible, but we had a situation where, quite frankly with you, we I don't want to say had, because we could have chose not to. We chose to do that piece of it, but the minute we could get those kids back into their home school, we shift them back to their home school. So that's the one trade-off with Octave and Chango, because we don't have the sister school trade-off, and so we have to do that. So Carrigan is the trade-off point for Chango, and Scano is the trade-off point for Octave. We haven't had to do anything with Octave in recent years. But again, so when we look at the totality of capacity, our first inclination is not to add just for the sake of adding. We look at the totality of capacity because if we have a 2nd grade at Carrigan with a class size of 18 and Chango with a class size of 30, we're going to do some trade-offs and between the 2 buildings, and because the buses are going to go there anyway.
Right. So I'm going a step further with this. The schools that have 5 sections, and we'll use Aranda and Carrigan, and forgive me for using Aranda because I know I've talked at length about Aranda in the past, but you see a couple of situations where they have 5 sections. You look over in Carrigan and you see a couple of sections where they have 3 sections, a couple of grades where they have 3 sections. Why can't, has it been considered to actually move some sections over into, so the kids stay together? So it's an Orenda class in Carrigan.
So we haven't been, so we have ample capacity still in that building. And so you bring up a bigger question. Again, I don't want to belabor this conversation at this point. When we start to see and big shifts, for instance, when we start to see, we're not there yet. I'm just going to go backwards. When I got here 12 years ago, Tasago was over 700 kids. Literally, there were classrooms in hallways. In fact, it was almost 800 kids, to be quite frank with you. Next door to it, Scano was at the average of 520, which is a nice sweet spot. 575 is what we kind of look at. But 520, you like really have space to do other things within the buildings. And so when we saw that huge imbalance, as well as we started seeing some other things, that's what led to the redistricting. So we're watching certain buildings and saying, okay, when is that point where we can't massage it, so to speak, that we didn't have to do some more significant shifts because of so Tasago's low enrollment is a concern. Carrigan's low enrollment is a concern. I'm using the word concern very specifically. Now, if we have those low enrollments and then we start having, say, Orenda going over 600 and Scano going over 600, now we have a problem. And now we're going to have to do a redistricting, rebalancing act, which is the more complicated piece of it. So right now we're in that kind of concern area that we're watching. And at the same time, for instance, the MOVE program that just presented is going to go into Tasago because we have space capacity. And so we're maximizing different things in different ways. But when we do go from that concern piece to that problem phase is when we'll start having conversations about redistricting. So some point on the agenda, I think it's a November meeting, when we do the enrollment enrollment forecast, we're going to spend some time to look to see, okay, when is that point where it goes from concern to a problem, because we never want to be in a crisis state. 12 years ago, we were in a crisis state when we had 700, almost 800 kids in a building that's designed for 575 legitimately. And so we don't ever want to be there again. And so we want to figure out how do we make some modifications. So when we look at our boundaries, and I mentioned contiguous boundaries, we don't necessarily officially designate them as buffer areas, but we know that there's some neighborhoods that we can easily shift, because it's not only about enrollment, it's about transportation, it's about all those kind of things that we can make some modifications to shift enrollment, but it's not a one shift, because if we shift some of Chango into Carrigan, some of Carrigan into Orenda, some of Orenda into Tasago, and all of a sudden you see the ripple effect happen all the way through. So it's like a lot of moving pieces. So we're not there yet, Naomi, and we'll do some of those minor neighborhood shifts before we go to a full-scale redistricting, which we did, I think now, came in effect about 8 years ago. We thought it was going to hold for about 6. And I think we're in the 2 bonus years now. We could get 3 bonus years out of it, but at some point we're going to have to do some boundary shifts again in the future, I would anticipate.
I was worried about the Chango phenomenon we're seeing, because Carrigan is the release valve for Chango, but it's also for Orenda.
Yeah, but it's a ripple effect. When you look at the
Well,
maps.
right, but it's as far as keeping the neighborhoods close, to your point. But okay.
Yes.
When Shattucon came online, that's the last time we did a major thing. And at that point in time, we were told, those of us that were involved on the committee, that generally speaking, the district thing will hold up for 3 to 5 years, and then you may have to do it again. So the fact that we're this far down the line is really
You're better than we thought we were.
It's really amazing.
And how does EDK reflect in these numbers?
So EDK is reflected in so it's a student body that it's part of. So there's some buildings that have, based upon their K sections, that's incorporated into that sequence of things. So EDK is built in because the question of it is how many kids are going actually in the EDK program in any one building, and how does it impact. So if you're in AMK, you're going to PMK, how does that impact the other group of PMK kids coming in that building? So that's taken into the account, so to speak. And there's enough flexibility typically in all of these. So Bob mentioned 6 students. So 6 students, except for 6 EDK students in kindergarten, but we have 4 sections. So when you socialize it across 4 sections, that's, 1.1 something kid. I'm not going to cut a kid in half or something, but you see how the math all of a sudden, so the impact becomes very negligible very quickly. So we know that, and we look at the trends over the years, and that's why we look at some of those. That's why so if we're going to make a fundamental decision, for instance, to change the criteria for acceptance in EDK, we need to know right then what does that mean, because if we're going to say, okay, the criteria right now and typical over the years we have seen whatever 120 kids in EDK based upon this criteria, and if we soften that criteria, so to speak, and because we know then, okay, based upon this softened criteria, if we would apply the same softened criteria to the population of students last year, that 120 would have gone to 180, then we need to know, okay, what does that mean impact-wise from a capacity perspective? So we have to plan that forward in multiple years, and that's why sometimes people say, let's do this right now. Well, we can't do this right now because you didn't plan for it a year ago. That's happening right now. So when we look at things like criteria, people have one conversation over here, but there's a whole impact over here. So we have to look at those kind of things and plan forward. How does that impact not only classroom capacity, how does it impact transportation? Because now so all those kind of things that we have to take in consideration when we think about those kind of things. But we're not driven by the impact, we're driven by the programmatic design and need. Because we say programmatically is what we need to do, then we plan for it. So in other words, what I'm saying to you, we're not artificially suppressing a number because of something else. If it requires us providing more, then we have to figure out how do we plan for it moving forward.
Okay, and so my next question is going down that next step.
Maybe I should stop answering questions.
Sorry. So the next piece is full-day kindergarten. So if you look at this, I see some really low numbers per classroom, and it's easier to talk about this when we talk about sister schools, Orange, Chattacon, Scano, Tasago, Orenda, Caricon. Looking at those, have you looked at, is it possible to go to full-day kindergarten in these schools, and how many more classrooms would it add if they work together? So the answer is yes. The short answer is yes, and the second answer is we can do anything that we want. The question is, how much disruption are you going to tolerate in the system? Right now, if the charge of the board is saying, guess what? You have 189 sections in all our 8 elementary schools. And you know what? Forget about where people live. Forget about where people are accustomed to. Forget about all those other constraints. Just go and make it happen that we can do this. We can have a whole different configuration. We may have to still add some classroom spaces. And if you say also, forget about the fact that we had an art room, a room designated for art, or we had a room designated for AIS, and forget about it. We just want to have pure, typical, standard classroom, and all those other programs just have to be on cart. That can happen, but I got to tell you, the whole dynamics of how we provide education changes. So the reason why I said it, because sometimes people just want to look by the numbers and not look by the program needs. Same way with staffing. We add staff, and sometimes people see, well, our enrollment haven't been increasing. Why are you adding staff? Well, because we have program needs that are different. And so we have staffing coming on program needs. We have classes, certain special education classes by law, very small numbers. And so high-intensive staff for very small numbers of kids, 6, 8, 10 kids, some instances. So somebody look at that and say, whoa, that ratio is off the chart. Well, for that program need, in fact, we probably need more staff still in those situations. So, and I say that, Neil, that's always a hard part of the conversation, is fundamentally how much do we want to change, and versus how much do we look to potentially add capacity space-wise and staff-wise, so we are enhancing what we're doing and not necessarily changing what we're doing, where we say, we have everyone here now, but whoa, there's certain things that are so different. I'm not going to characterize it being bad or good, other than it's going to be so different. So we look at those kind of things, and that's what the State Education Department, Gary, brought this up when we built Chattacon. The reason why we do sister schools largely is we can use existing capacity. So we didn't have 520 new kids when we opened Chattacon.
And by the pure regs of state, in order to build a new school, you need to have the new capacity if you're building a standalone. When we built to maximize state aid, but we built this, we used some of the capacity around it, and so gave us some flexibility, because yes, we had some new kids, enrollment was increasing, but we were able to use some of the existing capacity. So at some point, that's why kindergarten becomes so complicated from a financial standpoint for us, because we won't have X number of new kindergarten kids all of a sudden, and right now the state aid formula doesn't necessarily account for kindergarten kids, and so it's going to be a pure financial outlay to one, build facilities, and then we have to think from a budget standpoint, if we have budgetary tax caps already, and if we're going to drop an additional, whatever, $500,000 million on top of the natural growth of our budget, how much does that account for what we have seen in flexibilities over the years? So all those kind of factors we have to think about, because we have to think about not can we do it one time, but can we sustain it moving into the future? And so the long and short answer is yes, and the long and short answer is when there is enough of a problem that we have to say, okay, it's going to cost us a little bit to fix the problem, but to say we're going to cost us to fix the concern, two different set of factors at play. I mean, does that make some sense? And so we try to figure out then.
You're not treating the symptom.
Yeah.
But I guess all I'm saying is that I think it's important to do the analysis so that you can make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm definitely not proposing immediate, because it affects too many lives, and that something on this scale has to be planned out long term. And
I'll do that the year before I'm going to retire.
Well, but you know, Dr. Wood do the presentation again, Dr. Robinson.
She did a presentation a while back. However,
HR, is she coming back to do it?
no, so that's what I was looking at. We have on here,
So I think it was a charge
yes,
for us to
they're going to do a boundaries one in November. But I'm in the process right now of gathering some information on that whole piece again, because only partially one is to make sure that this is something that we're legitimately looking at every time to think about as factors change. How can we legitimately plan forward if we need to plan forward? Because you're going to kind of combine a couple of things. If you remember the construction facilities plan that we have, I think it's at 2027, 2030, with a huge dollar amounts, larger than other dollar amounts, with the notion that maybe at that point, it may be a time for us to legitimately build or expand on, who knows, on a facility. So there's some conceptual thoughts, plans out there, and that's the reason why we're having this whole land sale conversation, to say, okay, if we're going to purchase land, sell land, purchase land, where it's going to purchase going to be, is going to be for what purposes and those kind of things. And so these are all the contingencies that we have to plan for and address before we can make a pronouncement, this is what we're going to do. So I'm sorry, Bob.
So these are total enrollment numbers here, and the reason why that's kind of interesting to look at is you'll notice that the tops of all the bars are all different. So for example, this is Oranjan, which typically goes to 650. That's what it's been running for a number of years right now. So that's going to have the most number of kids. The next one that's close in size, in many cases, is Shattuckon, but you can see it's just a little less than Orenda. Now, what I want to point out is Tusago, Scano, Orenda, and Carrigon are all physically almost identical in size. Yet, Scano, Tusago, Orenda, and Carrigon all have different points of where they are now with total numbers of students, which is what reflects their sections. So it also talks about the actual physical space that's there. Shattuckon tends to, which is here, Shattuckon tends to run a little higher. They usually run closer to 550, but we can see that Orenda is already up there. There have been years where Orenda's been 625, 630, a couple of years back. So those numbers, again, when you look at the on-campus schools, in a perfect world, they'd all be pretty close. A couple of them are close, but a couple of them are pretty different. And so that's what we talk about when you see an on-campus elementary school here and another on-campus elementary school here that are pretty far below the sisters that are on there with them, and they're basically identical in capacity. So that's what the bigger concern is. By the way, kindergarten is the top row, the orange is first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, just so the key got cut off, but I figured you'd figure that out and you'd see the numbers that were there. And then these are the sections by school, by grade. So this is your kindergarten grade here, your first grade there, and then what you'd see all the way at the bottom is you'll see where the schools, the school names. So again, Aranjan would be first, followed by Chango, Carrigan, Octe, Arenda. And again, the numbers that the schools have at the kindergarten level and the first grade level tend to be just a little less than what you see at the third and fourth and fifth, or second, third, fourth, and fifth grade levels, because we get some of the returnees from private school. So in the end, this year we have 189 sections, K through 5. These are what we call homeroom sections. So these are where kids go to be with the primary teacher for most of the day. There are 0 sections that are over the maximum, if you remember the target page. Last year we had 0 sections over. The year before we had 0 sections over. But in 14-15 we were 6 sections over, and in 13-14 we were 10. So we have seriously reversed that trend over time. There are 9 sections that are at the maximum. So whether it's kindergarten at 24 or 5th grade at 27, that's a maximum. We have 9 sections that are at the maximum. We don't have 1,180. We have a finger that lingered too long on number 1. Otherwise, we'd have 3.3 students per section if we had 1,180, although there'd be a lot of people happy with that, I think. But of the 180 sections we have that are below the maximum, 9 of the sections are 1 student under, 34 are 2 students under. If you're 3 students under, then you're on target, that middle set of numbers that we want, regardless of the grade level. You'd be on target. And then you can see we then start going 4 under, 5 under. If you're 6 under, you're now at the minimum number, theoretically, that we would use to guide a section. And the district has 23 sections that are at the minimum, and then we also have another 27 sections that are below the minimum number right now. So that's pretty much how that runs. I think that's the last
The
slide.
bottom line is we're in a good place, certainly a lot better place than we have been in the past, and it's something that we watch very closely, and we monitor the numbers from October until, quite frankly, until September, and make adjustments as we go along. So thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat.
Bill,
Yeah.
a comment I was going to make relative to all this. We're talking about very objective data points and so forth, and understandable educational objectives. But into that whole thing, one of the things that we wanted to take into account were things like, we want Susie and Johnny, who are in the same neighborhood, to wind up, if we can, in the same school, that little Billy and Jane, who are brothers and sisters, are in the same elementary school, et cetera, and then it becomes a personal, human thing, and we try to address that, and most of the time we do, but it doesn't always work that way.
Yep. Good, thank you. And next on the agenda is a land sale update. I'll say this just from a general perspective, and I should have said this as we came in tonight. We met at 5 o'clock in executive session, actually to discuss land values. I would describe our process as we started with a big circle, and we've been continuing to have discussions with the town, both on cost and on the various value adds that we could look at on this. I think the circle is tighter. The good news is that we're continuing to talk with the town, and we'll continue to have discussions with them. Our optimistic target would be to have this in place so that we could, as we have on our current schedule, look to a mid-November vote by the public, because any sale of property under Section 405 of the Education Law requires that we have a public referendum, and we might, we've been thinking about combining that with a capital project. So we're using that as a target. It's not an absolute. We've had this property for years, and whether we do this in November or we do it in the spring, we'll see how tight the circle gets. We have targets that we'd like to get to, and we'll continue to work on that with the town. Had several meetings with them, and we'll continue to have more. So I look forward to our progress on this as we tighten the circle and tighten our focus.
Bill, do you just want to mention, I didn't have this on the agenda.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, we did provide today, I think everybody should have gotten a copy of the, not only the school assignments, but the committee assignments, and I think we've distributed that not only to the board, but also to the schools themselves, so that we all, you can expect to be contacted probably by principals. Some schools actually have a meeting in the summer, but I think most don't, and we will,
I emailed this version back out to
You
everyone.
did?
I will,
All right.
I will again.
Well, please, yeah, 'cause
With
I have
the
that
updated
on.
version that reflects
I
the
just-
The
I
email.
same
the
is
email.
that on this.
Okay.
I like that.
I'll send it.
Yes,
That's
please,
easy
very
way to
nice.
We like the pretty
send it.
visual, we're visual people.
Yeah, you-
Can I just ask, were there any changes
No.
from the
There's
one
no
that you
change
sent?
from that, no.
Okay, all right.
I think you got the futures thing right?
yes, we
Change
did
order,
make a
okay.
change on the futures at Gary's request. So we'll move to consent items. Going to have a motion to adopt the treasurer's report. Todd, second. Bob? Any questions? All those in favor? We'll move on to the minutes of the July 11th reorganization meeting. Could I have a motion? You're making motions.
Can I ask,
Todd, yeah. Let
the
me just get a
change
second,
items?
and then we'll,
Okay.
a second from Christina. So you had a question about,
Just adding something that was mentioned in last, that, the way it was referenced. I sent it to Vanessa. Is that fine to make that change? Okay.
it wasn't a,
Didn't change action.
It
It
item.
wasn't an
didn't-
action
action
item
items,
change,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
it wasn't.
Okay,
Okay.
yep.
All right.
So we'll look at it.
we'll look at that. All those in favor? Motion's adopted. We'll move on to action items, business items, the acceptance of the internal audit report on food service and food service inventory. Can I have a motion on that? Deanna, second. Bob? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Importantly, we heard this good tax information tonight. Moving forward, adopting the 2017-2018 tax levy and warrant, and I'm not sure if, are we still waiting the STAR information?
No, so we'll adopt it, because if it doesn't change, we'll run with it.
Okay.
But if it changes, we'll bring back the modification.
So what do we say when we get donations with, with gratitude? So can I get a motion on the tax levy and warrants? Gary, a second. Christina? Any questions or comments? With gratitude. All those in favor? Approval of the district save plan, we talked about that earlier tonight. Okay, motion, Todd, second. Naomi? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Approval of the organization chart, which was an attachment here. Have a motion on that. Christina, a second. Bob? All those in favor? Motion carries. Approval of the APPR plan that we talked about, I think, the last time, right? All the, Bob?
I do want to make a comment.
Okay, let me get a motion, motions. Motion, Todd, second. Deanna? Yes, Bob?
I was just very impressed by that plan for the RSP community we have. We have about, 60 people, but we now have some structured rubrics to put in front and have discussions with them about their performance. I mean, it's something we talked about at the table that we do benefit a lot. We do that with our teachers. I would like, I'm going to recommend that, with the NISBA convention, I know we're past the timeline for presentations, but this would be a good one to fast track. And just because there's probably a lot of other school districts in the state that aren't even thinking about this and would benefit by having that information that says, okay, if you have a counselor, if you have a speech therapist, this is what we're doing as Shen that we think would work for you.
Good. Good. Yeah. Good. Other comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to combine item 6, 7, and 8, all contracted issues? Can I have a motion? Todd, second. Deanna? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Free and reduced lunch meal policy. We do that every year. Can I have a motion on that? Christina? Second. Bob? All those in favor? And finally, scholarship and local grant donations. Can I have a motion on that with gratitude, right? Naomi, second. Deanna? All those in favor? Motion carries. And we'll move forward with acceptance of special ed placements.
So Mrs. Johnson is here in place of Mrs. Mylod. Mrs. Mylod didn't change.
Where's Mrs.
This is, This is the other version of Mrs.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I'm here this evening to present our recommendations for CPSE and CSE students. I believe you already have the summaries in front of you. Any questions?
The only thing I wanted to ask, is it possible to get, I don't know if you missed that question, I think it was at the tail end of my email. Can we get a cumulative of how many kids are in each school?
Yeah.
All right, is that possible?
The breakdown.
The breakdown of by each school.
And also the programs too, the different programs
Yeah.
we have in different schools.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd be great, thank you.
No problem. Before we go. Motion?
Sorry.
No, Christina, second, Deanna. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thanks, Sarah.
We move forward with staffing recommendations.
Good evening. So I just want to bring a couple of highlights. We have been very busy in the HR office. We are recommending 10 new teachers for probationary appointments on the staffing agenda. One academic administrator, he's here in the audience, for special education at the high school, replacing Peg Warner, and that's Keith Bow. Keith, would you stand up, please? We also will be recommending Rose Barra to move from the academic administrator K-5 Math and Science to academic administrator Integrated Business, Facts, and Technology. And we will be backfilling that other position. We're excited about that. And we had 2 retirements on the classified side. Robin Appel will be retiring after 12 years as a teacher aide, and Margaret Clark retiring after 24 years as a bus driver.
So, do we have the director of facilities?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, and we have, thank
Just
you.
did all those today, so.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. We also are recommending a new director of facilities. Actually, it's school building and operations, and it's Clyde Starkey, and he will be starting on August 28th, and I will invite him to the next meeting. We just signed him this morning. He couldn't get out of a commitment that he had. Thank you, Dr.
Okay. So could we have a motion to accept the staffing recommendations? Bob, second. Christina, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you.
So before Justice done, we still have, we're close to filling the raw language, Rachel Stead's position.
Correct.
We were trying to get that today, but it didn't work. And which other ones we have? That's the only one.
We'll have the K-5 academic administrator
And
for
then we
math
have the
and
backfill,
science.
we'll start the process for Rhodes' position. So the reason why I'm sharing this with the board, because our goal is to try to get people on board early in the summer as soon as we can for transition purposes. And so literally we just had the final interviews for the integrated one this morning, and because we want to try to get people on the agenda so we can have the month of August to deal with the transitions.
So does Rose stay what she's doing on top of, or?
Well, that's why we want to get it started, because we're going to post that tomorrow and get a process rolling.
During the transition, she will be the Wonder Woman that she is, but she will be transitioning to the secondary level and will be posted.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
We didn't have any public comments to open the meeting. Are there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this point? If not, we're not going to have a policy review update. We'll get on a schedule for policy reviews. I call everyone's attention to the fact that continuing with the summer, we meet in 3 weeks. That's an important meeting. Jill always has a long list, and we have a full agenda for that meeting. And also, we'll be doing a follow-up to the board retreat we did earlier. So the board will be meeting at 4 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock, we'll move to the study session. I have a motion for adjournment. Wait a minute. Bob and Deanna, all those in favor? Motion adjourned. Thank you all very much.
So can I just ask Keith,
Yeah.
Keith, can you come forward? Come on, Keith, you got to respond faster than that. You just get hired, buddy.
We were talking about, never mind him.
So the reality is,
So Todd, Bill,
us go
Todd
ahead.
Gary.
Nice to meet you guys.